This video, captured by the toll booth security cameras, shows the last footage of the Pomar family alive. Less than 2 hours later, the couple and their 2 young daughters vanished without a trace, sparking the investigation into one of the most well-known and controversial cases in Argentina. We invite you to join us as we explore the details. Criminologists say that there is no such thing as the perfect crime. What exists is a poorly investigated crime. In every investigation, there is always a key clue that leads to the killer. Let's find it together by revisiting this open case. Hello everyone, my name is Peter, and in each video, we will go over all the details of the most horrific criminal cases. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like so I can keep bringing you the best investigative content. Also, remember to activate the notification bell, as I'll be uploading videos 3 times a week. The case of the Pomar family. Gabriela Villagrán was born on April 6, 1974, in Pergamino, a city located in the Greater Buenos Aires region of Argentina. She was the daughter of Maria Cristina Robert, and although the name of her father is unknown, it is known that they had a very close relationship and that she was his favorite. Gabriela's father was diagnosed with cancer when he was around 50 years old, and 3 years later, as his condition worsened, Gabriela found out she was pregnant. For Maria Cristina and her husband, it was wonderful news to know that a baby was on the way. Unfortunately, her father never got to meet his grandchild, as the illness claimed his life before that. Despite the devastating loss, the birth of her son, Franco Ricara, was a blessing for Gabriela and filled her with hope. Her relationship with Franco's father did not last long, but they separated on good terms. A few years later, in the early 2000s, Gabriela married Fernando Pomar. Together, they built a family and had 2 daughters, Candelaria and Pilar. Fernando, a chemical technician, was described by most people who knew him as a reserved man of few words, which contrasted with Gabriela's more cheerful and outgoing personality. This contrast in their personalities complemented each other well. The family lived in José Mármol, also in the Greater Buenos Aires region, but at some distance from Pergamino, where both of their families lived. Gabriela was a homemaker, taking care of her children and the household, while her husband worked as a chemical technician at a company. However, in 2009, Fernando lost his job, which led them into financial difficulties. In fact, they were forced to put their house up for sale, which they were still paying off through a mortgage. Despite the challenges, Fernando did not sit idly by. Determined to move forward, he bought a machine to produce nylon bags, which allowed him to generate some income while he looked for a new job. For this reason, when an opportunity came up for a job interview as a chemical technician at a well-known agricultural biofertilizer and insecticide company in Pergamino, Fernando didn't think twice. He decided to make the trip, not only to attend the interview, but also to visit his mother-in-law, who lived in the same city, and share a family meal. On Friday, November 13th, Gabriela spoke with her mother over the phone and shared the news about the interview. Initially, Gabriela was not entirely sure whether she would join the trip or if only Fernando and their 2 young daughters would go. But in the end, she decided to accompany them. Thus, on Saturday, November 14th, the Pomar family got into their red Fiat Duna weekend to start their journey to Pergamino. Before heading out, they had to drop off Franco, Gabriela's eldest son, who was 13 years old at the time, at a friend's house. The teenager had an important exam on the following Monday and preferred to stay behind to study. After saying goodbye to Franco, Gabriela, Fernando, and their 2 daughters continued their journey in the family car. What began as a typical family trip quickly turned into a nightmare. On the morning of Sunday, November 15th, Gabriela's mother began to worry. She hadn't heard from her daughter and was unable to reach her by phone. The family had left around 7 p.m. on Saturday, and the trip to Pergamino was not supposed to take more than 4 hours. However, the Pomar family never arrived at their destination. They had seemingly vanished without a trace. After more than 12 hours without any news from the couple and their daughters, the growing concern among their relatives led to an official report of their disappearance. This marked the beginning of a search operation that would become one of the most shocking and controversial cases in Argentina. During the initial days of the investigation, the authorities maintained a low profile. Reports stated that the search efforts included land, air, and water operations, not only in the Buenos Aires province but across the entire country. Authorities assured the public that all available resources were being employed in the search. Despite these intense efforts, there were no signs of the family. As the days passed, desperation grew, while the case attracted increasing media attention. Finally, on November 20th, 6 days after the family's disappearance, the first pieces of evidence emerged. Toll booth footage, captured around 8 p.m. on Saturday, November 14th, showed the family's red Fiat Duna weekend passing through. However, the footage did not reveal whether Gabriela and the girls were inside the vehicle, sparking numerous theories, each more far-fetched than the last. But just a few days later, another set of images surfaced from a different toll booth. These images, taken approximately 20 minutes before the first ones, clearly showed all 4 members of the Pomar family inside the car. This was the last known footage of the family alive. A witness claimed to have seen them walking calmly through a shopping center in Pergamino 5 days after their disappearance. However, upon investigation, this account was dismissed as false. There were also rumors that the family had been traveling with their toy poodle and had abandoned it at some point, but authorities later debunked this information. As the days went by, the media began covering the case extensively, focusing on the mysterious disappearance of an entire family. The ongoing coverage not only kept the public on edge, but also fueled all sorts of speculations about what might have happened. The most popular theories included voluntary disappearance abroad. Some speculated that the family had left the country voluntarily. However, it was discovered that Gabriela and the girls' documents were left at home, making it highly unlikely as they would not have been able to pass through any immigration checkpoints. Additionally, border alerts were not issued until days after their disappearance, reducing the likelihood that they could have legally crossed borders. This theory was also contradicted by the phone calls Gabriela had made to her relatives in Pergamino shortly before disappearing, in which she assured them that they were close to arriving. Fleeing due to debt. Another theory was that the Pomar family had gone into hiding due to financial difficulties based on the fact that they had put their house up for sale and were facing economic struggles after Fernando lost his job in May. There were suspicions that they might have owed money to dangerous individuals who were threatening them to collect the debt. However, further investigation revealed that despite their financial difficulties, the Pomars were up to date with their mortgage payments. The mystery deepened as days turned into weeks, with no concrete leads on the family's whereabouts, leaving authorities and the public puzzled by their sudden disappearance. Both the theory that the Pomar family had fled the country and the speculation that they had voluntarily gone into hiding were quickly dismissed by friends and family. They insisted that Gabriela would never have left her eldest son, Franco, behind. By that time, Franco's father had already picked him up, and he was staying with family in Pergamino. They tried their best to shield him from the relentless media coverage, which was filled with increasingly outlandish and terrifying theories. One particularly grim theory suggested that Fernando might have killed his entire family before either fleeing or taking his own life. There was also speculation that they could have been targeted by a vengeful ex-partner. However, in either case, it was assumed that their bodies would have been found by then. While there were whispers of marital strife, there was no substantial evidence to suggest that their issues were severe enough to result in such a drastic outcome. Another possibility was that they had been kidnapped and were being held against their will. Yet, after 11 days without any contact or ransom demands, this theory began to lose credibility. At one point, the media even floated a bizarre claim that Fernando was linked to the infamous Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, but there was no concrete evidence to support this wild accusation. Others speculated that the family had fallen victim to a robbery, particularly for their car, a common crime at that time. If this were true, it was thought that the vehicle could be hidden in a garage somewhere, with the family either held captive or worse. But the complete lack of witnesses or solid evidence only deepened the mystery. The sixth hypothesis was that the family had suffered an accident. Surprisingly, this was one of the first theories dismissed by authorities, who claimed that their extensive land and air searches along the likely routes taken by the Pomar family had turned up nothing. Meanwhile, the investigation pursued two main lines: voluntary disappearance and involuntary disappearance. The lead prosecutor even suggested that a family conflict could be involved, hinting that Fernando might have possessed a firearm that could not be located in their home. Additionally, authorities reviewed all 911 calls, but none offered any relevant clues. By November 24th, 12 days after the family's disappearance, investigators decided to search the family's home in José Mármol, hoping to find any leads on their computers. The house was searched a total of 4 times, with officers seizing computers and even the children's drawings, looking for signs of domestic violence or abuse. However, no evidence of internal conflict was found. The following day, the search efforts were intensified, and by this point, the media had fully latched onto the case, with the entire nation captivated by the mystery of the missing family. The police launched a massive operation involving 150 officers who meticulously searched both sides of the route that the Pomar family was believed to have traveled, covering a 43-kilometer stretch. During this operation, they found a dead dog with a gunshot wound, initially thought to possibly belong to the Pomar family, as well as some blood-stained clothing. However, these discoveries did not lead to any immediate breakthroughs, and the case remained unsolved. The most significant clue came on November 27th, when a man named Casimiro Frutos, a construction worker, called 911. According to later reports, the man had been traveling on a double-decker bus to Pergamino on November 16th, when from his seat he spotted a red car overturned on the side of Route 31. Initially, Casimiro Frutos, the man who had seen the overturned car, thought it was simply an abandoned vehicle and didn't give it much attention. However, when he passed the same spot 10 days later, he saw the car in the same position. By this time, the Pomar family's case had turned into a national scandal, so he decided to report what he had seen, suspecting that the vehicle could be linked to the family's disappearance. His call was answered by the Departmental Investigations Office in Pergamino, but sadly, his report was dismissed. Authorities speculated that the location he described could not be accurate, as their agents had already searched that stretch of road without finding anything of significance. Meanwhile, investigators analyzed video footage and text messages that the family had sent to relatives at different times. This allowed them to determine that the Pomar family's car was traveling at a slow speed, around 80 kilometers per hour, and that their disappearance occurred somewhere along the route, but they could not pinpoint the exact place or cause. On December 8, 2009, a farmer riding near Route 31 was the first to discover what neither the 3,000 agents nor the exhaustive search efforts had been able to find: a strong, putrid smell led him to a horrifying scene, the bodies of the Pomar family. For 24 days, the country had been gripped by the mystery of their disappearance, and now the grim truth emerged. The family had been involved in a fatal accident on the road. Their vehicle had lost control, crashed into a ditch, and flipped over, rolling several times. On that day, Maria Cristina, Gabriela's mother, had been alone at home for nearly a month, confined and terrified. Her son Carlos had removed the phone cables to prevent her from answering calls from people who were giving false information or mocking her situation. The only thing she did was watch television, and it was through this that she learned of her daughter and granddaughter's tragic deaths. Once the official information flowed, forensic evidence confirmed that the vehicle's occupants had not been wearing seatbelts, which caused them to be ejected during the rollover. Fernando, 40 years old, suffered a fatal skull fracture. Pilar, 3 years old, was the first to die, also from a skull fracture. The body of Candelaria, 6 years old, was in an advanced state of decomposition, making it difficult for forensic experts to determine the exact cause of her death. The autopsy of Gabriela, 35 years old, revealed the extent of her suffering: a liver tear, multiple fractures in her right arm, pelvis, jaw, and leg. She likely survived for more than 48 hours after the accident in agonizing pain without receiving help. Family members and the public expressed outrage that Gabriela had suffered so long and that assistance had not arrived due to the negligence of those in charge of the investigation. The autopsies confirmed that the injuries sustained by the family were consistent with a car accident, with no signs of external violence. The road where the tragedy occurred, like many others in Buenos Aires province, was in poor condition, full of potholes that made it dangerous for drivers. Local residents claimed that many accidents had occurred on that stretch, and the chief of the local fire department pointed out that only a few months earlier, another fatal accident had happened on the same curve where the Pomar family's car was found. Despite repeated warnings about the poor state of the road, no action was taken until after the Pomar family's tragedy. It was only due to the media attention and public outrage that authorities decided to repair the dangerous section of the route. On December 11th, 2009, family members, friends and neighbors gathered to bid farewell to the Pomar family in an emotional ceremony held at a private cemetery in Pergamino. Once the funeral rites were completed, public outrage manifested through various channels. People could not understand how it took 24 days to locate them, especially when the accident had occurred in an area that was supposedly already searched. 12 police officers were subjected to disciplinary investigation, including those who dismissed Casimiro's report on November 27th. However, the punishment was minimal. 7 officers were exonerated and others were suspended for 60 days. Later, all involved officers admitted they had not received proper training to conduct search operations. Only 3 officers with lieutenant ranks faced trial for falsifying reports. These officers falsely reported that no trace of the Pomars was found on the Placibat curve. They claimed they conducted a thorough search of the route and saw no signs of braking or an accident. The falsity of their reports came to light when they finally reached the accident site, where marks were still visible on the asphalt. However, in May 2018, the Junin judiciary acquitted those who lied. The legal process continued in the civil courts, with Gabriela's son and other family members as plaintiffs. The case concluded in October 2019, when the court declared the province of Buenos Aires responsible for the poor state of the road. The judge ordered the state to compensate the family for the psychological and moral damages. By this time, 10 years after the tragedy, Maria Cristina was beginning to lose her battle with cancer, which had been consuming her along with her sorrow. She expressed feeling betrayed, as the criminal case brought no results against the negligent officers and the civil justice process was reduced to monetary compensation, which wouldn't bring back her loved ones. She and Franco supported each other emotionally, but always avoided discussing one sensitive topic. Her grandson never spoke about the accident. Almost a year later, in August 2020, the Federal Court of San Martin ordered a 70% indemnity, equivalent to 1,700,000 Argentine pesos, currently about $1,800 plus interest, for Franco for the loss of his family. The remaining 30% of the responsibility for the accident was attributed to the father of the family, as authorities claimed that one of the vehicle's tires was in poor condition, contributing to the loss of control. Additionally, none of the 4 occupants were wearing seatbelts, which caused them all to be ejected from the vehicle. By this time, Maria Cristina had passed away from cancer, which she had battled until her final days. She had demanded to know the truth, believing that the handling of the case was so absurd that something must have been covered up. To her, everything seemed to be intertwined with politics, and she hoped that someday someone would come forward to explain what had happened with the investigation and why the police officers who were supposed to be investigating had seen nothing. The site of the accident is marked with 4 crosses as a reminder of the tragedy. This unfortunate case became a part of Argentine history, demonstrating what should not be done during an investigation. Despite various hypotheses, the reality was simpler. It was an accident caused by a neglected road. As for Franco, the only survivor who did not get into the car that day, it was known that from the moment of the disappearance, he stayed in Pergamino with his father. Though he studied in Buenos Aires and traveled daily from the province to the capital, he never used Route 31. His family had previously avoided taking him that way to spare him further pain, and when he was old enough to drive, he chose alternative routes, never the one that had taken his mother and sisters. That's all for today. As always, I appreciate your support of my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, you'll help me continue creating content. See you soon.